Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Chassidus in the Morning, 15 minutes change your life. Kuntres, Heichaltzu. Okay, so we've been discussing, we've been starting to discuss what does it mean, or what's the idea of Midyan. So we had a few questions in the beginning, that the story of Midyan, it seems to imply that it's about Moshe, with Moshe having to do this war. This war wasn't a war of conquer, but it was a war of just like a kames havayim, to like retribution for what they did to us. Let's understand how that works with the language, and why does it have to be dafk with Moshe? Yeah, and so then we started to explain that Midyan is the idea of like separation versus like the contrast between whereas Kedusha is all about coming together, which is like the contrast between Yaakov and Esau. Yaakov had 70 nefesh, 70 souls, but the souls is the language of singular. Whereas Esau is actually Rav, and he was 6 souls, but they were many, because many meaning separateness. And this is what we started talking about. So then we started going into this idea connects with the idea of tohu and tikkun. So tohu is, well, we're going to discuss it today, but just a quick story that relates is that there was a chassid, his name was Meir, I forgot his name, Meir, whatever it was, and he lived in Eretz Yisrael, and to make some money, partially like in the 30s, I think it was the late 30s, early 40s, and to make money, he would go around giving bread, like selling bread. And it was the situation was very hard over there in Israel at the time, and people didn't make much money. And he ended up going by accident to the wrong, so to speak, the wrong house, to this guy that he was like a poet, and totally secular. And he said, "Oh, just the guy I need. I'm looking for a word for emotion in Aramaic." So yeah, you're a chassid, you know Aramaic. What do you think? So he's like, "Listen, I'm not sure. Like I can't think of it on top of my head. It's a discussion." And he said, because he told him, he was in the context, and he started giving him his whole poem, and it was very anti-religious and saying not nice things about the Tanaim Moraim. But this chassid didn't skip a beat, and he's like, "Listen, it's a little bit weird what he's saying, but we have to go to Shabbos meal. We'll discuss it at Shabbos meal." And he invited him for Shabbos, and the guy's like, "You know what? Fine, I'll come." So they forged a bond, a relationship, like 30 years. They had a good relationship. And at a certain point in the relationship, the guy Meir told this poet, he said, you should make books. You should send your books. I want religious, of course. He said, you should send them to the rabbi. So he's like, fine. And he also had a relationship with the rabbi. And so one of the books that he sent him, it was called The White Messiah. And it was very like a somber book about a guy that he survived the Holocaust, and he was a rabbi, and then he became like whatever, he had a few things, and then and then ended off like the whole story is like, his life went down and ended up doing suicide. It's a pretty crazy story. I think giving to the Rebbe to read these things is very interesting. And so the Rebbe saw him in Yechidus, and the Rebbe said, like in general, I read your books and I send you like a letter back, a reply. Thank you for sending the books and and commenting, and he goes, but this book is so difficult for me to read. It's like it's taking me a long time. So the guy asked the Rebbe. So the story that they're focusing on is the guy asked the Rebbe, how do you have time for such things? Like this is a book that's not even like I feel bad that you're reading my books. And the Rebbe said, so he said, how do you have time? The Rebbe said, he goes, if you manage your time well, he goes, then you have infinite time. And so that was sort of the lesson. The lesson was the time thing, that if you know how to use your time wisely, you have infinite amount of time. You can imagine the Rebbe has a lot of time, like has no, how busy he was, but he managed. And it wasn't that he had a bigger 24 hours in the day than we did. It was just that he knew how to use it wisely. But another lesson is how the Rebbe cared for this guy, and the Rebbe learned from him. And this is sort of one of the things of the Maimon. The Rebbe could say, this guy, he's writing things that are totally opposite to him. It's totally opposite to everything I stand for. I hate this guy. Like, get out of here. And should write a letter cursing him out. Why are you writing such books? It's disgraceful. It's embarrassing to Yiddishkeit. It's a chil Hashem. But the Rebbe, which is an ultimate level of Kedusha, he's able to connect and to use these things in the positive way and find the syncrasy within it. And that's sort of the lesson that we're meant to be learning over here. And this is sort of the story of tohu in contrast to tikkun. That's what we're going to talk about today. Top of page 18. So in tohu, because remember, we're talking about, and just before this is Yaakov and Esav, Yeshli Curl. Yaakov says that I have 70 nefesh, 70 souls in singular, that it's all coming together. There are 70, but the 70 coming together. Whereas Esav is 6 nefashos, it's 6, but it's souls in plural because they're all distinct, Yeshli Rav, many distinct things. They're not getting along. And this is sort of the difference between tohu and tikkun. So in tohu, which is the level of tohu means like chaos, is the midas, the motive attributes could not tolerate one another. Tohu is when they can't come together. Chesed, kindness, could not tolerate the trait of gvura, might. No, could gvura tolerate the trait of chesed. So chesed and gvura go together. Like we learned in the last Maimon, we talked about this first Maimon, is about chesed b'chesed, chesed b'gvura, chesed b'tiferes, and all coming together. And in each level, there's the other ones that are included within it. Whereas in tohu, that didn't exist. It was just chesed, just gvura. Another, just a quick point, that we shouldn't get scared when we hear these words, tohu and tikkun, and in Kabbalistic terms, because the more we understand it, the more we'll understand and appreciate God and godliness and different aspects of godliness. So this is not teaching us these things just to know some random information, but it's to appreciate life and how life works, and also how God works. And with this, it gives us a better appreciation for everything. When you say, let's say God is good, and then just keep it simple. So it's, yeah, okay, God is good. But when you appreciate the level of godliness that you're talking about, and you understand the whole city shtalshlus and how everything comes, and you're like, and then you say, let's say, when God's essence needs your mitzvahs. So it's like, yeah, okay, whatever, God needs your mitzvahs. But if you understand what that means, God's essence, but you understand all these levels below it and how everything works and what level we're talking about, so you really appreciate what that means and really can be a life-changing experience. So yeah, so try to pay attention. And also the next Maimon you learn that talks about these concepts, it'll be more familiar with you and you'll appreciate it more. So as will be explained, each attribute in the realm of tohu shone with full force. Hence, it could not tolerate an attribute of different nature. To use an example, there are certain people who see only their point of view. They don't have the capacity to see another's perspective. Thus, a person whose character tends to kindness will always look generously on the others and have trouble seeing their faults. When another person points out the need for caution, the kind person may argue with him. If he's a kind person, he doesn't want to do it. You could say that's a gevurah shebechesed, but he'll argue with him. He's a kind person. He wants to do kindness. So someone telling him, hey, but that guy, you shouldn't give him tzedakah because he's using it for drugs. Chas v'shalom. So he says, leave me alone. I'm doing tzedakah. I want to give tzedakah. And he'll argue with him. Conversely, a person who is overly critical will object and argue with those who challenge his judgment and advocate leniency. And on the other hand, someone that's very critical, so then the same, calm down. Like, you don't tell me to calm down, you calm down. And he gets all they get all angry. Similarly, each of the attributes of tohu could only express their nature and could not understand and tolerate the different qualities. And therefore, for this reason, so now as we see here, that tohu, they're all very distinct. Chesed is chesed, gvura is gvura, and they don't come together. So therefore, a narrative in Torah is not just for stories of events that transpired in this world. It is a manifestation of spiritual realities. So what happens in the Torah is because that's how it's happening in spirituality, showing us what is happening in the spiritual realm above. All the stories of the Torah actually occurred with all their details in according to the straightforward understanding of the biblical narrative. So whatever happened in Torah did happen. However, they also contain a spiritual meaning that reflects the makeup of the higher realms. But within this story, it's showing us what's going on above, in the spiritual sense, what's happening. Indeed, fundamentally, the Torah is a description of a spiritual reality. Essentially, Torah is describing to us what's happening spiritually. That spiritual reality shapes the nature of our material existence, and what's going over there is what making what we have over here. To the extent that these truths manifest themselves in the events and situations in this material world, and that's why we have the material. So we're really interconnected. And just to give an example, what we were talking about before, it's like, and I think this is very, let's say with what the war that's going on that happened in Israel, and this whole, the back and forth is going on, or the political scene in America these days, are we tohu type people that we can't understand someone's perspective, or as we're going to talk about at tikkun, that we can come together. I mean, we can understand, and I think it's a very important. That's what I say. The problem with tohu is that a person is very strong in their opinion, but they're not able to understand someone else. And a key to success in life is being able to understand where other person's coming from, and also to be able to explain it to them in a way they can understand. You have to understand where they're coming from and things like this. The Torah states that the king of Edom, the physical counterpart of the attribute of tohu, so Edom in this physical world, which is a representation of tohu, successfully reigned and died. And that's what we're going to talk about, the shattering of the vessels, Shviras HaKelim. This reflects the well-known Kabbalistic concept of Shviras HaKelim, shattering of the vessels, the norm of tohu. And I guess I don't want to get into it right now, and we'll talk about it later. But essentially, so what we're saying is we're trying to understand how does Midjan fit into this whole concept? And we're going to see that in the next class or the class after that. But now we're talking about tohu and tikkun, or tohu. Essentially, we're explaining tohu is a world that it's dominated by, and it's a very high level. It's also very important to understand. It's a very high level. But the problem with tohu was that chesed and gvura couldn't come together. It was too strong of chesed, too strong of gvura, and it just wouldn't get together. And ultimately, it broke. It destroyed itself. And this is a very important lesson for us in life, that we shouldn't be so strong in our opinions. We should be strong in our convictions. We shouldn't be so strong in our opinions that we can't understand someone else. And the key, let's say in relationships, is to be able to understand someone else when they're coming from. Let's say something happens and you see one way and they see the other way. If you're going to sit and argue your point, you're not going to get anywhere. And you're just going to have a very miserable experience. Whereas if you can say to yourself, or say to them, let me understand it from your point of view. It doesn't mean that you have to give in to your opinion. It just means you have to have the bittul, which we're going to discuss, to be able to put your opinion to the side for a second. Say, hey, let me understand this person's coming from. And it could be a simple example is like what's going on in Israel. That I hope most of us, we understand pretty clearly what's going on, and we should educate ourselves a little bit to understand what actually is going on. But when someone comes and tells you that why innocent people are being killed, so you can come and say and be a tohu person, say, hey, well, what do you mean? Start arguing with them, or you can say, let's have a discussion and let's understand you, and you listen to them, you'll understand them, you'll make sure they're understood, and you shouldn't understand them. And when you do that, then you can have connection, you can relate with them, and you can make them feel understood, and then you can really explain to them the reality of what's actually going on. So the practical lesson for today is to see in ourselves, are we tohu type people, and work on being tikkun type people, that we should be able to understand someone else's opinion. When they come from, someone tells you something, we should listen to it, and we should bring it in, like the Rebbe, imagine how busy the Rebbe is, but he took the time to read these person's books, even though they were totally antithetical to Judaism. But the Rebbe wasn't a tohu type person, he was a tikkun type person. Convictions we should have, and it doesn't mean we have to bend what we find that we care about. It just means we have to also have the ability to understand and listen to other person's perspective. Have a great day, everybody.